into a brand new wave, drowning out the noise that's tame. Liberty whispers through the brave, breaking free from every chain. Nullify the rules they crave, crypto beats that pave the way. Anarchy with minds that's safe, algorithms from dawn to day. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride. Beyond control we take a stand, casting off the iron brand. Freedom flowing through our hands, revolution's our command. Decentralize the way we plan, all together we expand. Breaking shackles for the clan, in this journey we're unpanned. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride.
Technical difficulties. This is Crypto Wednesday. And sometimes we got technical difficulties within the blockchain, especially when the big blockers are trying to take over the small blockers, man. But the small blockers just won't go away. This is episode 33. We keep on growing, dude. We keep on going, and we love the fact that you enjoy it and you love this series that we're on, Breaking Monero. I am the legacy of Jennifer Ed Kaiser. I'm Zachary Kaiser, and I'm here to take you on a ride to boldly go where no man has gone before. With my number 2, this bald
Hey, wait.
guy.
We're not on the Legacy Rod podcast today. We're at Conan Kun's No Bitcoin Cash Land. That's right. We're gonna break Monero here with Bitcoin and Conan Kun.
Yeah, so sorry about that, man. I saw a bald head down there backstage. I was bringing you up. I picked the wrong one because you're bald. You're both bald.
See,
Why
right?
is
That's
that?
why the people behind me have hair.
That's probably
an alternative universe.
You should probably stick to that. You should probably keep the Conan poster behind you or background, whatever you want to call it. Whatever, man.
He's holding a sign.
He is holding a sign. What's the sign say? I don't speak
Conan
Japanese.
Kun, no Bitcoin Cash Land. I could say
really
it
what it
specifically
says?
in
Move your
Japanese.
head.
Yes.
What is this? A post for ants?
Right?
I see the BCH. I like it. Even Detective Conan likes it. Bitcoin Cash,
Yeah.
man. The real Bitcoin. What
That's
Bitcoin
right.
was meant for. What the white papers talks about for Bitcoin Core.
The closest
yet-
implementation to Satoshi's vision that is not Satoshi's vision, which is total crap.
Yeah. Which is it's entirely the feds, man. Feds. Why do feds have to
Opportunists.
Yeah, opportunists. Yeah, you call them opportunists. I call them feds, man. Because anytime somebody's an opportunist, they're probably working for the government.
Yep.
CIA ops, parasites, CIA ops, psyops. I mean, Roger Ver kind of nailed it. He knocked it out of the park. Not only with hijacking Bitcoin, but his interview with Tucker Carlson.
That was really good.
That was really good. Too bad Tucker's a Fed, so gotta keep your you gotta keep your limits
Friends
there, Roger.
close and your enemies closer, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's get in and dive into this episode 3 of Breaking Monero, because we really want to break Monero.
Right. Learn as much as we can about this wonderful crypto that keeps being delisted, but the price keeps going up. Number go up, baby. Here we go.
Hello, and welcome to the third episode of Breaking Monero. Breaking Monero is a series of episodes where we explain the limitations of Monero's security and privacy in a comprehensive and understandable way. Today, we are talking about zero decoy transactions or zero mix-in transactions and the chain reaction effect that sort of comes as a result of these. So, sort of a double episode today, but we're going to try and keep it shorter than the other two in order to get a little bit more streamlined and specific here. So as always, I'm Justin. We also have Sarang on here. If you want to just say hi real quick, Sarang.
Hello, I go by Sarang Noether, and I'm one of the researchers who does work on behalf of Monero Research Lab and Monero community.
Excellent. So I actually want to start off with a nice, quick screen share from one of the presentations I gave at DEF CON where I talked about these ring signatures specifically. So let me just pull that up. Okay, so you can see here on the left of the screen, there is a ring signature. Everything in this green oval here. That's like all of the potential outputs that can be sent in a Monero transaction. Let's say that this gold one here that I have my cursor on is one that is the true one spent and therefore has the key image that comes from it. And all these black pots of gold that are just Monero outputs are potential spends. For zero decoy transactions, these are transactions that are sent without any other output being a possible spend. So if you see this transaction, you know that that is the actual output that is spent. So you can see an example here. Suppose this is another zero decoy transaction. It's a ring size of 1. You know, since only one output is possibly included in this ring, that is truly the output that is spent there. So as a result, you can say, okay, since this is spent here, I can look at all other transactions that include this output and say, hey, this output cannot be there. As the example here, the ring size includes this output. So you can put a nice X through this output to say, hey, obviously that output cannot truly have been spent. And then if we continue this along for several other transactions where they each have their own set of zero decoys. Again, these are old Monero transactions that could be sent in Monero's early history in 2014 and 2015. And you can see that if every single other output is referenced in a different zero decoy transaction, then you can realize that one of the outputs is actually spent if there's only one plausible spend left, and therefore that ring signature is compromised. This is really the basics of a whole zero decoy attack or a zero decoy form of analysis where you look at transactions where there is only one possible actual output spend and you compare it to other transactions to learn information to sort of whittle down and narrow down information. And then from there, since this output is known to be spent in this one transaction, the yellow one there, then any other transactions that could include that output, for example, this output created in TX10, then we can also eliminate it here as shown in the second ring signature that's on the right here, where you sort of have this propagating effect. This propagating effect is called the chain reaction. So on a really high level, this diagram, I think, really helps summarize the idea of zero decoy attacks and analysis on Monero and the sort of resounding chain of reaction that results from these zero decoy transactions. Does that look good to you, Sarang?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that I kind of visualize this iterative process in my head is almost kind of like peeling away an onion. I mean, it's not an exact analogy because things aren't onions. But generally, the idea is that you, like you said, you look at zero decoy transactions, you look for their appearance elsewhere, and you can just start peeling those off of other rings. And eventually you might get some rings that then become zero decoy transactions, and then you can take those and iteratively work those through larger rings. So you're right, basically the whole idea is to iteratively find zero decoy transactions using the property that zero decoy transactions have outputs that are known to be spent. And of course, in Monero, the whole goal is that we don't want to know if an output is being spent or not, because that makes it an invalid decoy for a future larger ring.
So Monero moved to make zero decoy transactions disallowed beginning, I believe, in March 2016. Is that correct?
Possibly.
Okay.
I feel like I should have looked that up beforehand.
Yeah. So, but between that period of time when Monero raised the minimum ring size and until the onset of Ring CT in early 2017, you still saw the zero decoy analysis still have some, although decreasing, it still had some measurable impact. You could still learn a lot about transactions. Why was that really the case, that you could still perform this analysis despite no one being able to send these transactions anymore?
Sure. So again, the whole idea of this is that it is iterative, right? So when you're able to take early transactions and kind of whittle away what the known decoys are to get to the true spends, you can kind of push those forward into smaller rings and then a little bit into larger. So as ring size gets bigger, effectively the number of outputs that you're able to kind of whittle away from those larger rings, ends up being less effective. So again, part of the reason we have larger ring size and ring size increases over time is so such analysis is less effective. It's kind of a belt and suspenders approach. You're kind of adding in some more decoys to ensure that that propagating effect has less of an effect. So they still were, effective to a degree, but the degree to which they were effective definitely went down over time. Part of the reason that is because the way that you choose your decoys, we haven't really talked about exactly how we do that. We just kind of use the word random and kind of don't talk about it, has changed over time. And I know that we're going to be having a future episode about how exactly we choose outputs from the chain and why that does matter when it comes to decoys. But suffice it to say that the way that we started choosing our outputs has gotten better over time, and that has also made this particular analysis less effective than it was before.
Excellent, thanks. So can you speak a little bit about the history where Monero was learning about these sort of zero decoys? I know that there was the research papers Emerald 1, Emerald 4 that talked about the idea, especially in regards to chain reactions, or that those are specifically addressed in those research papers.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and you said that there was a new research paper, or relatively new research paper at least, that helps quantify these a little bit better.
Yeah. So the idea of this was known for quite some time. There was some internal discussion that eventually culminated in a couple of internal papers, MRL 1 and 4, that talk about this to varying degrees, some of which was in the form of kind of an accidental passive analysis, and some of which was from kind of an active analysis perspective, where you might have someone who's purposely injecting outputs into the chain that they then have some knowledge over. So you can look at it a few different ways. But the extent to which this actually happened on the later chain wasn't really quantified until a couple of papers came out, one of which had two different names. I think its name as an early preprint was a little bit different, but the later preprint from April 2017 was called An Empirical Analysis of Traceability in the Monero Blockchain. And then there was another later paper, which has a confusingly similar name, A Traceability Analysis of Monero's Blockchain, that did a really good job of talking about a few different forms of analysis and did a good job starting to kind of quantify those forms of analysis. And what they showed, and kind of the number that got floated around for a while, was that something like 65% of Monero outputs were known to be traceable by some combination of zero mix-in, chain reaction, maybe a couple other forms of analysis, which on its face sounds very, very scary. Like, my goodness, if 65% of the outputs are known to be spent and should not be chosen as decoys for modern transactions, surely I and everyone else are totally screwed. But again, the way that we choose our outputs is very, very unlikely, and is less likely over time to choose any of these. And then later on, a lot of other papers seem to kind of rediscover this analysis. So we saw kind of a swath of preprints over time that maybe introduced one or two other newer small forms of analysis, but also for some reason tended to bring up this idea of chain reaction over and over again as part of that analysis, which I think led to kind of some misunderstanding about what was already known about chain reaction, unfortunately. So we actually did kind of a fairly independent look to see if we could reproduce those values in MRL 0007, where we introduced another more general form of analysis. And we found approximately the same numbers, that if you just kind of look at the chain as a whole, from whatever point they looked at it, kind of back toward the beginning of Monero's history, you still saw around 65% of outputs being known to be spent based on this analysis. But if you look at modern transactions in particular, kind of after the big ring CT switch, they're vanishing. I mean, at the time that we did it, we found that precisely 0 outputs were vulnerable to this kind of analysis. And again, if you were to choose old outputs that were known to be compromised, that would be bad. But modern transactions do not do this.
Exactly. I think that's important to sort of cover. In the last episode, we talked about the idea of plausible deniability. Zero decoy transactions were a really important sort of area to look at because it broke down the plausible deniability of people's transactions on Monero, because you could explicitly look just at the information on Monero's blockchain and determine that since this sort of transaction occurred, this output could not have possibly have been spent anywhere else. So it was a really important consideration to look at. And it was really great to see. I know we have several responses out there. We have several research papers at this point that looks into this, but it's important to distinguish Monero pre-ring CT and Monero with ring CT, because it's night and day difference. And
it is. And it's definitely worth noting that that modern transactions that only use ring CT outputs, and for the most part, that's like with vanishingly small exception, that is the transaction. Those are the transactions that happen. Early pre-ring CT outputs, remember, those are the ones where we had denominations, kind of like bills and stuff. Those aren't chosen or used. So a lot of the papers did not make a clear enough distinction, and I think that kind of muddied the waters for a while on this whole 65% number.
So is there anything else, Rang, you wanted to mention on zero decoy, zero mixin transactions, or do you want to focus now a little bit more on the idea of chain reactions, which continue to be something we sort of test other attack vectors with in Monero, with these sort of chain reaction methods, because we don't really look at zero decoy or zero mixin really anymore, because Monero's sort of moved on from those.
No, that's true. And I mean, to be fair, the idea of zero mixin is what underlies the idea of a chain reaction, because you got kind of this onion methodology for trying to piece transactions apart. But as we're going to talk about in later episodes, we have other methods of analysis to try to determine whether or not outputs are spent. And you can apply the idea of a chain reaction after you run those other analyses. So if I'm able to determine by some other means, whether or not another set of outputs is spent through my new clever analysis, whatever it might be, and there's been improvements to this over time, you can also take those outputs, which you now know are spent. Those are effectively a zero mixin transaction, and you can then apply chain reaction off of those. So in general, while we do find that being able to identify some modern outputs as spent does let you kind of remove them from consideration from other modern transactions, again, the entire point of a chain reaction is that you have to be able to do that enough so that you get another large ring all the way down to one remaining output. And in general, we're not able to do that, which is good. Maybe in some transactions you can remove 1, 2, maybe even a higher number than that from consideration. But provided you don't get down to 1, you still have that plausible deniability.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's really important to cover the idea of zero decoy, zero mixin, because you can sort of reuse the same sort of thinking that you do for these zero decoy, zero mixin, which are pretty basic and really easy to understand, for far more complicated attacks that sort of try and recreate a sort of zero mixin, zero decoy situation.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to show people. I have a spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you all regarding how we sort of evaluate this chain reaction and see under what network circumstances with a variety of compromised outputs that other transactions are also compromised. So I'm just going to start sharing that. Let me get that up here. All right, so I use this pretty frequently. I created this in early 2018 to help better to make a spreadsheet that's easier for people to understand. This is really just, though, an extension of MRL 1 and 4. There aren't any real new ideas introduced here. It's just really easy to play around with. So I have, just for like a really easy sake here, I have the ring size set to 3 right here. So it's a really low ring size, but this was Monero's first mandatory minimum ring size here, was 3. And you can see here that on the left here, you have a different proportion of outputs that are compromised. So these vary between 0 and, I mean, technically not 100%, but essentially 100% there. And you can see the proportion of the time that the true input is revealed based off of you being able to break down these ring signatures. So you can sort of look and see directly at the chain reaction effect here. So you sort of say, okay, half of the outputs are compromised, let's say. Let's say half the outputs are 0 decoy. You can go through and say, okay, well then, for 25% of the transactions out of the box, by just doing this one level of analysis, you can say, okay, well, these are now compromised. And then you can say, okay, well, now we found these 25% new compromised outputs. Let's run the test again, including these 25% as compromised. And you can do this across several layers here until you ultimately take the sum of all these amounts in this last column here. This is the total proportion of all the outputs that are compromised, that are compromised after this sort of chain reaction impact. So if you have a circumstance where 50% of the outputs are revealed to be true under a certain circumstance, you can keep running tests and sort of break down the integrity of another 29% of the outputs. So the total amount would be about 80% of the total outputs would be known to an outside attacker. So these numbers don't really mean anything, but a larger number means a larger chain reaction. In this sense, I sort of just add them together. So you can see if I put in a smaller ring size, let's put Monero's current ring size in here of 11, that these chain reactions get very, very small, right? You're down to a much smaller number than you were before. As far as like relative terms, this is 0.01. Before it was 1.24. And again, that number doesn't really mean anything. It's just sort of a number you can compare to other ring sizes. So, but ultimately you can see for any specific amount, the first order effect is vanishingly small, even for enormous amounts of compromised outputs for large ring sizes. And if we went to incredible ring size like 100 or whatever, you can see like the chain reaction would have to be quite immense for it to really have any substantial impact on other transactions. So I'm just going to quickly just show the sort of difference between Monero with ring size 3 and Monero with ring size 11, what it has now on the chart here on the right. And you can see on the bottom right here, this is the proportion of sort of known compromised outputs to begin with. And on the y-axis here, you can see the proportion of transactions that were compromised, or proportion of rings that are compromised. And so you can see here with ring size 3, there's far less protection than ring size 11. And as the ring size gets larger and larger, these curves shift further and further to the right and get like increasingly steep curves, because it takes more in order to perform a chain reaction effect. So this is what Sarang and I mean when we say that transactions need to, or with large ring sizes, it really starts to take a lot in order to have chain reactions on the Monero network. So I find this resource to be really easy to sort of help quantify what we mean with chain reactions. We'll often run this table. Again, this doesn't have to be for 0 decoys that are affected, but it could be any sort of proportion of outputs that are affected. And we can run tests regarding the information that we plug into this Excel spreadsheet that I generally find very valuable.
Nice. Yeah, and it's also worth noting too that again, while modern transactions are vastly unaffected by any of this particular kind of analysis, we do in fact have a tool that it is available as part of the Monero kind of general built-in tool set. We used to call it the blackball tool. We realized that was kind of a confusing name. I consider it just a spent output tool. What it lets you do is it lets you take your copy of the blockchain. It lets you run all sorts of analyses, including this one, 0 decoy and chain reaction, and internally kind of flag those outputs that, again, are known to be spent and should not be chosen as decoys. And it will make absolutely certain that you do not choose those as decoys. Again, the likelihood in a modern transaction of choosing an output that has been affected by this analysis is vanishingly small. Vanishingly small, as in we haven't come up with any modern outputs that haven't happened yet. But for transactions that do spend older, like a lot of older pre-ring CT outputs, it will still help you avoid those. The tool is kind of inefficient to run because it does a lot of analysis, but if you take a belt and suspenders and glue the pants on yourself approach, a tool is available to help you do that.
It's generally my opinion that with large ring sizes, this tool really helps us only evaluate whether or not the network is under a sort of severe attack. Where if you have a chain split, you can be like, okay, let me go evaluate at this point. We'll talk about chain splits later. It's not necessarily a tool that people need to run for the sake of sending funds for a low risk transaction, or even
no, absolutely not. I mean, for zero decoy transactions and for chain reaction based transactions, again, modern transactions are unaffected.
Excellent. So I think we really covered most of the basics on zero decoy and chain reaction. Hopefully this is a nice summary for people. Is there anything else you want to add to this conversation, Sarang?
Just that, there was a lot of really good research that originally went into this, both internally and by external researchers. And I mean, there still continues to be research on this topic, even though we understand it pretty well, by researchers who may not have read the previous papers or were adding things onto them. So there are plenty of different papers and preprints available if you have kind of a more scientific or mathematical bent to you and want to learn more about kind of the analysis that led to our protections against these kind of analysis.
Excellent. So again, thank you, Sarang, for joining me. Thank you to the listeners for watching this latest episode of Breaking Monero. I'm glad this one is shorter, so hopefully it was nice and just all the information you need and not much else. So we'll keep trying to make other episodes short for you all. With that, we would like to say goodbye. Make sure to watch our later episodes and take care.
See ya.
With that, we'd like to say goodbye, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. Peace.
I'm on way.
I'm just kidding.
We're
not
not
done.
Bitcoin Cash Land.
We're not done. Very interesting, actually. Anything to add there, Andrew?
Well, they were talking about chain splits and stuff like that, but this is going to be talking about that later on in the series. And I don't want to get too far ahead compared to what they're going to talk about. But I do want to just make a very brief statement. What they're basically implying is it's a security measure, right? Like what CZ Binance was talking about a couple of years ago. There was some kind of hack of the Binance website, and they said, well, can we get our crypto back? And he said, well, I guess we'll have to do a 51% attack of the network and reverse the transaction. And this is what they're talking about, is situations that aren't exactly making a lot of people happy are not able to be reversed for the security of the network. And they're talking about, trying to break the network, breaking the network's balls, basically, to try to, discover and de-anonymize people. That's what they're talking about in
I like that.
Zero.
I like that.
Yeah.
Breaking the network's balls, so to speak, basically.
Yeah.
Now,
zero decoy.
we're all retards here, okay? So I need you to explain. Talk to me like I am a retard, and make sure you follow Retard News on X, because for the news, for the average retard, because we're all retards. So, but explain in lame retard talk what exactly zero decoy means.
Well, what they're talking about here is that you have a transaction, right? And a group of transactions, a cluster of transactions. And I got a picture here. They were talking, this kind of is in reference to what they were talking about last week. Just a second. It kind of helping hand here, so to speak. The ring signatures in real life, okay, right? See how these women are all wearing the same dress and they all got white hair that look exactly the same?
Yeah,
Well,
like
in a cluster of transactions, the group, the amount of people in the group of the transaction, the rings, helps keep you semi-anonymous, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a zero transaction, they split it off into one particular transaction, which makes it harder and harder to maintain that anonymous make sure that you can stay anonymous on the Monero blockchain.
It makes it harder for you to expose compromise.
It's basically it's these old ladies here in this picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's taking them out of the picture and making it easier for you to spot whose transaction is what. So if you're at Starbucks and you pay with Monero, and there's only one lady, and there used to be 3 ladies, it's a lot easier to narrow down. This is her wallet, and they can reverse engineer. And it's maybe that may not be the best way to put it, but effectively,
we're all retards, Andrew. You're explaining it to us like we're geniuses.
You can't just reverse the transaction on the Monero network, but you have a lot better chance of locating who has what wallet, especially if you use a centralized exchange.
Why does Monero? Yeah, and that transitions to my next question. Why does Monero want to know the output spent of a transaction?
Well, they don't. It's designed specifically so that you can't, guarantee. If you go to look at a Monero blockchain explorer, let me see if
let me reiterate the question. Actually, that was how retarded of how I worded that question. But why is it? Why do you want to counteract output spent on the Monero exchange?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, I was pulling up the blockchain explorer on there.
Why would you want to disguise output spent on the Monero exchange?
Because it's privacy by default in the protocol in Monero. Let me go ahead and share the tab here from the Monero blockchain explorer.
So you want to the initiative is to maintain privacy.
So see, you can see here the block hashes and everything on the transaction. If you click on it, these are all the transaction confidential and the amount. No matter what you do, it's not like a traditional Bitcoin transaction, right?
Where you see it, where you basically see who spent it on the blockchain.
Yeah.
You can pinpoint on the Bitcoin blockchain. You can actually pinpoint whose wallet is what.
You can narrow down by like the mining pool. What mining pool and who does what and where the transaction went to and which confirmed which. It's not the same on Monero. Monero, there's no way for you to pinpoint that level of granular detail. It's as anonymous as possible.
This has been an excellent exclusive from correspondence me of Retard News. Make sure that you follow at retard_news on X. But let's cover one final thing. Obviously, we don't want to go completely in depth, give a little basic rundown because they are going to continue to layer by layer expolate more and more of what Monero is all about. We're breaking Monero, right? But speaking of layers, explain the onion layer methodology of Monero and its transactions.
Well, they're using onions as an example, but it's not really as effective an example.
Well,
it's just it's
where the statement
closest the closest thing that you can realistically in real life compare it to.
Yes.
It's because it's like they say on Shrek, ogres have onions, Monero has layers, right? Ogres have layers, Monero has layers, but you can't go in and go to the granular level, the cellular level, and identify things and try to reverse engineer it.
And that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is there's several different layers. It's going to be more difficult for you to distinguish. Well, where is the centerpiece? Like, how can I? So it effectively the idea, the example given to compare it between the onion layer the layers of an onion is the fact that you're not going to be able to figure out whose wallet is whose, or who
It's
spent
it's a,
this, or who has this amount or whatnot. Like
it's a
you're gonna
lot
have it's like a train,
it's a lot like
one
the onion
car
router,
after
right?
another.
You connect
Hmm.
from one point, one hop to the next, and once
Like a
you make
train.
the next connection, it just constantly cycles all around the world, and
Hmm.
every transaction just bounces, right? And then you reach your final destination. It's
Yeah.
it's
So.
really
Hmm.
difficult for you to
So
reverse the
yes.
connections.
So the better example point that they should have used was maybe a train. You're hopping from one car to the next. Each car has their own staging output. You get what I'm saying? Like their own phase, their own what's the word I'm looking for? I'm still trying to wake up with coffee. Um their
You're
own
good.
design, right? So
Yeah,
like one car
implementation.
implementation, there you go. Like one car of the train is the dining hall. One car is the luggage hold. One car is the passenger. Your basic coach passenger. One car is maybe your sleep quarters cab for people that want extra more than just a seat. You know what I mean, and so on and so forth. Like each car has its set world within it, from the bar to the entertainment to the food, and dining to just basic upkeep and relaxation and hangout. So, and that's effectively what we're
And
trying to create Monero as. There's different aspects to it. Am
now
I? Am
that is
I?
a
I
good
mean, if I'm wrong,
that good grasp, but
yeah.
it's not as straightforward as that. Say you have the dining car in Japan, right? And
Well, I
then
mean, I
you can
am a
move on to the
retard,
next
man.
you move on. It's like you transport to the next car, which is a luggage car in South Korea, and then the next car is in Antarctica, and so on and so forth. It's not a straight line. You can't tell when you step into the next cart. You can't tell which cart you're in until you.
Hmm.
I guess there's a sign on the wall saying you are now in Germany, right? In the or you are in North Korea.
That'd be a hell of a trip from Japan to Germany, man.
Yeah.
But I see your point though. I see your point. So this has been a heck of a journey, man. Speaking of journeys, so I can't wait to continue on and finish this because I'm learning just as much as you are learning more. I'm learning, and everybody else here is learning. I hope. I mean, we are retards. Retard news on X. Uh, follow follow retard news on X. But I like it because I want to get a grasp of what Monero is really all about. What a decentralized exchange is truly tangible for society as a whole and for human interaction and action. The theory of money and credit, as it should be, not the fiat standard. And
Yep.
because we need to learn, we need to embrace, we need to understand different diversified factors in our economy. So this has
We don't
been awesome.
we don't want a central point of failure. The harder it is for them to chase down everybody, the more momentum and escape velocity we have as a movement.
Well, with that, we've gone once again. I mean, it has more to do with what we're talking about right now. So we've gone over time. We try to be a half an hour on these shows, but we've gone well over time yet again, and that's
Not
fine.
as not as long
But
as last Breaking Monero episode. That's sure.
that is for sure. But anything else to add there, Andrew, before we close out?
No, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys are learning something good. We really enjoy having these episodes.
So, and from there, everybody head to freeroger.org if you have yet to, and sign the petition. And let's free Roger. Let's free Roger now. Actually, I think I don't think it's free Roger Ver. I got to change that. It's
free.
freerogernow.org, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, but it's okay.
Scratch that.
It
Scratch that.
it probably redirects.
It probably will redirect. It's actually freerogernow.org. That will be fixed for the next episode. But freerogernow.org. Sign the petition. Let's get Roger Ver free. That's probably where I messed up. I just put his last name on there. So, and with that, head over to whotouchedit.com and get yourself some political statements. Get yourself some Christian apparel too, some Christian statements. Get yourself something to show out to the world and help this brother out because he has a lot of things to say and it's a business that's worth investing. So get yourself a share, get yourself a shirt, and help out small business everywhere. So, but with that, Andrew, I think that's enough of me, and it's enough of your baldness, dude. Conan can stay.
Okay.
Yeah, Conan's can stay. But live long and prosper. Peace.
Thanks for watching.